Hey guys, and welcome back to another little entry into this mini-series that I'm doing. First off, I'd like to sincerely thank you for all the support on the last video. That was amazing, and I really appreciate you guys, so thank you. So this ranking is going to be basically the minor factions instead of the major factions that we focused on in the previous video, and it's going to be based off of the same three criteria, so the lore of each faction, the aesthetics, and the atmosphere that they create. So yeah, buckle up and let's get started. The Delinquents, they're the group that appears in missions like Twisted Nerve, Think You Come Again, 23 megabytes a second. And they're kind of like the low level, not necessarily gang affiliated, but career criminals where they've been in bad situations before. They've been in prison, they've been homeless, they're doing crime for the sake of making money. But not the amount of money like an organized crime unit, like a gang would do. They are instead kind of just scraping by, many of them are experiencing some mental health issues, or they have drug addictions, things like that. And they're you turning to crime to get the money to do that. So lore-wise, there's not much there besides just that financial motive to survive in a city that's falling apart. So lore-wise, they're not very exciting, I do have to admit. No hate. I know Think You Come Again's not my favorite map, but Twisted Nerve is, so. But in general, lore-wise, not very deep. Outfit-wise, like you can see here, the hoodies, the masks, sometimes some gloves, nothing too exciting, no gang-affiliated attire or anything like that, kind of bottom of the list. And then atmosphere-wise, I don't think they really make you feel like you don't feel scared fighting them. They do invoke a little bit of sympathy, maybe just because obviously these people have had bad experiences in their life and unfortunately are turning to crime because of it. But it's not sympathetic in the way that the Left Behind is a sympathetic faction. It's sympathetic because, hey, they're in poor situations, but they continue to make poor choices, and because of that, they don't really get that sympathetic, they don't invoke that sympathetic feeling. So, overall, yeah, you're going straight to D, unfortunately. But yeah, and then up next, we have Gerard Scott. And so, this is the guy from the map A Lethal Obsession, which takes place up in the hills. It's that cabin, it's got the traps, and the crazy guy in a ghillie suit and two other people. And I remember the first time I played this map, I had no idea about the traps, and I kicked open that door at the very bottom where you enter into the basement, and it blew up, and I died immediately. So, yeah. I would say, aesthetically wise, he's one of the cooler ones, because he's the guy decked out in the ghillie suit with an AK, and he's crawling through his holes in his house and popping out and just popping shots off at you, and he's, he'll get you. I mean, I think he's 77. So he's pretty versatile for an older gentleman, and he's not somebody to take lightly. And he is a former USIA, which is the Ready or Not equivalent of the CIA operative, and he does have some sort of connection to Judge, who is the main person that you play as in the Ready or Not campaign. And if you search around his cabin, there's actually an achievement for this. There, I believe, it's either 6 or 7 audio tape recordings where he actually addresses Judge specifically. He left those recordings for him to find. And I know to S-rank this mission you have to arrest him, but I'm pretty sure he had no intention of being taken alive. But he is very suspicious of the government. He's a former USIA operative, and he seems to have some background knowledge of Judge and whatever background kind of experiments that are going on with him to make him the effective super soldier that he is. And that's without getting into it too much, that's lore-wise very heavy in the greater scheme of everything. So lore-wise, he's on top. And then atmosphere-wise, like I say, I try not to include the map too much in the atmosphere, but a guy in a ghillie suit crawling around a filthy cabin, popping shots off at you, like I said earlier, it's scary. This guy is trained, he was a intelligence operative. He knows what he's doing. And so, despite only having 3 enemies on this map, it manages to keep you terrified throughout the duration of it. And for those reasons, he's going straight to S rank. So quite the juxtaposition we have here between the delinquents and Gerard Butler. But that's going to leave us to our third faction, which are the Rogue Secret Service agents. And so these take place in the mission Sins of the Father, and they're affiliated with the Left Behind. So I talked to a couple of viewers in my last video who said that they were just Secret Service agents who went rogue because they were sympathetic with the cause of the Left Behind, which, in theory makes sense. And I buy into that a little bit. The readyornot wiki specifically says that they were plants by the Left Behind, meaning that they were either selected or approached by the Left Behind and converted prior to this incident happening. But either way, they play basically the main enemy that you're fighting in Sins of the Father. And once again, like the Left Behind, like trained agents that they're Secret Service agents, and they're likely, if they're affiliated with the Left Behind, they're likely veterans, so they served. So, they're highly trained. And that kind of creates an atmosphere of there's some fear there engaging them. You got to be careful. I don't think they're as difficult as groups like Black Sentinel, but they are a formidable force for sure. And there's a high number of them too on that map. So compared to Gerard Scott, there's not as much, there's only 3 people on that map, kind of in that mini faction there. But with this one, there's a lot more. So it's a harder fight for sure. And they still have, they're all trained. So it's still difficult to engage them. Lore-wise, similar to the whole Left Behind, they have somewhat of a sympathetic cause, which I mentioned in the last video. Granted, in this one, they kidnap a senator's family and they kill civilians, so they kind of lose that sympathy a little bit. So if you had to separate the Left Behind, the main faction, and the Rogue Secret Service agents, I would give these guys a little bit less sympathy because they do end up harming, killing civilians. They kidnap, I think it's adult children, so it's not they're kidnapping little children, but they kidnap somebody's family. These people aren't, you go back to the name of the mission, Sins of the Father. These people are not responsible for the actions of their father. You can't take out your grievances with their father on them. You know what I mean? So for that reason, they're not as sympathetic. But, the whole Left Behind's message and their affiliation with them is that people like Senator Fremont are passing bills that are taking what resources are available for veterans away from them. And as a result, you alienate a lot of people who did serve, all these veterans, and it kind of turns them into what they have become, members of the Left Behind and the Rogue Secret Service agents. But as I said, sympathy-wise, not as much. But aesthetically-wise, it's awesome. It's a Secret Service. They look really cool. So, overall, I'd probably say, I'm really waving my hand. I'm part Italian, so it's ingrained in me. But yeah, so I'd say overall, I'm gonna go A, just because unlike the Left Behind, the main faction, they don't really invoke as much sympathy, lore-wise, that the Left Behind does. So, that's going to move us on to another sympathetic faction, which is the cult from Carriers of the Vine. Excuse me. So, this cult is led by Elaine Raskin, who, similar to Gerard Scott, is a former USI agent. And it seems like the USIA keeps coming up again and again. And keep in mind, this is the CIA, readyornot's version of the CIA, so clearly there's some involvement there. So, whether she's actually a former agent, or she's just been disavowed and sent to create this kind of faction, who's to say? Maybe I believe that. Is it confirmed? No. But who's to say that it is or isn't? But essentially, this faction is sympathetic because they are targeting basically, they're targeting predators. You know what I mean? Like, these are people who go out and they're attacking women and stuff like that. And so, up until they shoot the police officer that causes this D platoon to be sent in to basically arrest the faction leaders and dismantle the faction and whatnot, you know, they are they're being vigilantes, essentially. They're taking their problems into their own hands, they're going out and they're solving them. Whether or not you agree with the methods, it's sort of easy to understand the motive. Like, these are people that have probably been victims themselves, and as a result, they're going out and they are taking justice into their own hands. And, you know, when you're going through this mission and you're seeing a lot of these women in this cult, essentially, you can tell, like, a lot of them are trying to reaffirm themselves. Like, when you arrest some of them, they keep saying, carry is the vine, over and over again. You can see that these women are like, they're scared, they're frightened, you know, a lot is going on. Maybe there's some brainwashing going on, but they're probably, you know, like I said, victims themselves. So it makes it very difficult. It is, like, if you pay attention to it, it's a hard mission to go through. And like I said, I think they honestly invoke, if not more, the same amount of sympathy that you can get as the Left Behind. And I said this in the previous video, if you didn't watch it, like, it is easy for a faction, like bad guys, it's easy not to like them or not to understand them. But when they are written so well that you actually kind of feel bad for them, that just kind of shoots them up tenfold. So that's why, like, factions like Carries the Vine, The Left Behind, Rogue Secret Service agents, they get ranked, to me, obviously this is all subjective. If you disagree, I want to hear it in the comments below, but because they invoke that sympathy, they get ranked higher because, as I said, it's just easier to make it's easier to hate somebody bad than to understand or sympathize and, yeah, understand them. So, lore-wise, that's the Carriers of the Vine. Aesthetically, I mean, come on, it's a cult. They look awesome, like the masks and everything. It's scary, especially that, like, kind of church altar area in the back. The vibes, atmosphere that they give, you know, like, it's pretty spooky the first time you go through it. And once again, it's one of those ones with traps too. Like I said, I'm not trying to bring the map so much into it as I am talking about the faction. So, like, masks alone and their kind of code of behavior to shoot and then run away, and then it's a pretty big map. And especially once you get in that courtyard and things like that, they have ample opportunity to run and engage and do this. So fighting them too, because there's so many of them, can be pretty difficult. So especially if you're trying to S-rank it, oh my god, it's like a nightmare. But yeah, so essentially it's not right click there. So they aesthetically are really cool. They are lore-wise pretty cool, sympathetically, and atmosphere-wise, they do invoke that kind of, like, spooky. It's a cult, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of split because I could totally see them S-rank. Lore-wise, I don't think they quite compare to Gerard Scott, but I definitely think they're more sympathetic than Rogue Secret Service agents, so we're going to drop them beneath Gerard Scott, but above the Secret Service agents. They're definitely an S tier, but I don't think they beat, purely from, like, a lore standpoint, Gerard Scott. So that's next going to lead us, I should say, to the drug-making cooks from the map Twisted Nerve. So these are specifically the people who are manufacturing the drugs in that map, and not necessarily the people that are addicted that they're employing to, like, dig the tunnels and whatnot. So essentially, these cooks work for and once again, my pronunciation, I don't speak Spanish, I never took Spanish, so I apologize in advance because I'm going to butcher this, but they work for the Los Locos del Pacificos, and essentially, they are the manufacturers of drugs for them, and they manufacture them, and then Los Locos Pacificos, they distribute them, and that's how they make their money. So lore-wise, it's purely financial gain. And then if we move into a little bit of the lore deeper, on Twisted Nerve, there's that big tunnel in the background. And so that tunnel is not just being dug for the sake of, we're taking these drugs, so we're going to go dig a tunnel. No. So it's being dug specifically to breach the sewer system in Los Sueños, so that the, once again, I apologize in advance, the Los Locos del Pacificos can increase their distribution network. Whether that means that they're going to be like floating stuff down the sewage, I don't know. Maybe it just means they're going to like crawl through it. Not a job I would want, not a job I would do, but whatever floats your boat. So lore-wise, that's the cooks. So aesthetically wise, they're wearing garbage bags and weird masks, but somehow they get to pull off that kind of like still creepy, it's a night map, so it kind of has that creepy vibe to it. There's writings on the walls, and I know I keep bringing in the maps to these things, and I say I'm not, but ignoring the map themselves though, the voice lines of the cooks specifically are this raspy, creepy, like they've got this, whatever the masks does, it like alters their voice a little bit, and it's kind of creepy, and aesthetically wise, they do pretty good. And then atmosphere wise, ignoring the map, like they're not hard to fight, and they do have that kind of like creepy tone to them, so like they creep you out a little bit, but like other than that, atmosphere wise, I wouldn't say it's super strong. The lore is not that crazy. The tunnel reveal is kind of interesting, so either a high B or a low A, but I'm gonna stick them in B, just because they're not that impactful. They're creepy, sure, but like I said, creepy isn't at the same level as sympathetic. So moving on, next is Mindjot, which is the group that is in Sinuous Trail. So that's part of the not the Beaten, what is it called? Give me 1 second. I'm checking my notes. I actually took notes this time, because last time I was like blanking, trying to do it from memory. Okay, so they're the ones that work for, this is part of the Exploited time frame, which is about all of the imagery that is being distributed, the illegal imagery that is being distributed across Los Sueños, starting with 23 megabytes a second with that raid, and the streamer has his possession of it and whatnot. And then that leads you to the storage facility, which is guarded by Mindjot. Mindjot is the storage facility. So for a bit of background lore, Mindjot was kind of very significant when Los Sueños was going through a financial crisis. They helped to build back the economy a little bit and were very impactful in that way. But unfortunately, that didn't last very, very long. Once the economy of Los Sueños was back on its feet, the Mindjot kind of was outbid, and it's a smaller company, by bigger corporations and things like that, which turned them to be not very profitable and kind of caused them to start dipping their fingers into the illegal business. And that's how they get wrapped up in the whole Exploited time frame, working for the Spider and whatnot from there. So essentially, it seems that the guards that are, so the security guards that you face there, they have body armor, they're well armed and whatnot, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, the obvious one is, they're actually aware of what they're guarding. So do with what you will with that disgusting fact. So like, they're aware of what's going on, and that's just gross. Like I said, it's easy to hate these guys because of what they're involved with and what they do. So very hateable faction, I agree. So, but secondly, they have actually had a series of robbings lately, and burglaries and whatnot. I probably didn't pronounce that word right, but that's okay. So what happens is, or what has happened is, they've been robbed, and then they were actually robbed once by people who dressed up as police officers. And that's why there isn't much hesitation when they see the police and they shoot, because they have been facing this kind of thing before, where they have had a break-in, people identify themselves as police, and they were shot at by these fake police officers and robbed. So this is something that they've dealt with before, but they're just not aware that, at least right away, that it is the police that they're facing, so they're quick to shoot back. Not necessarily out of malice against the police, but rather instead because this is something they've experienced before. Maybe a lapse in judgment from some PTSD or whatever, but... So, that's basically lore-wise Mindjot. Aesthetically-wise, they're all in the same uniform, which is pretty cool. Like, I find it aesthetically a little bit more cool than, you know, the gang uniforms. Like, it's a work uniform. They've got body armor, which is pretty sick, so... Aesthetically, they're definitely above, like, the delinquents and the other, like, cartel members, things like that. I mean, like, they're not wearing, like, suits and stuff like the Secret Service is doing, but their outfits are still pretty cool. I wish the image for this depicted one. But they're like the, you know, the white and the black. It's pretty sleek, pretty clean, that kind of thing. So, that's aesthetics, that's lore. Moving on to atmosphere. Well, like I said, they're pretty well trained. They can be a little bit difficult to fight, but they don't really creep you out. Once you learn that they're aware of what's going on, maybe that grosses you out a little bit. And I mean, it should. But besides that, like I said, it's pretty easy to not like somebody because they're doing bad things. So it's not as well written. So I think these guys overall, they're a small fish in a really big storyline. But I want to say B, but my heart's telling me C. Like I said, it's easy to hate the bad guys, and not that you need to like every single faction that's, you know, in the game, but just because they don't really do too much lore-wise in that sense. Like, there's not much sympathy there. They're bad guys, you know, they're aware of it. It's gross. So we're going to stick them in C. Moving on to the next one, we have the Tran brothers, and it's dawning on me now that there are quite a few sympathetic factions in this list compared to the last one. So the Tran brothers are in the weapons trafficking story arc. So their story, if you don't know it, is probably the most sympathetic of all. Basically, this family is on a house on the mission ends of the earth, and their mother has, I believe it's cancer. It's a debilitating disease that she has, and they're trying to pay for the treatment, and it's like $400,000. I don't know if they don't have any insurance, or their insurance isn't good, or whatever, and it's not covering it, but they need money. So their oldest son, this guy here, connects with one of his friends who has connections with the, I think it's the Los Locos. Let me check my notes. Give me 1 second. Nope, I didn't put anything in my notes for these guys because I thought I had them down. But I do believe it is the Los Locos that they have connections with. And basically they start converting semi-automatic weapons to automatic weapons that the Los Locos can then take and distribute through the Greased Palms map. And then I also think the Buy Cheap Buy Twice is also part of that storyline as well, with distribution of weapons, and then they also do cars there too. So yes, they're committing crime purely for financial gain, but it's the financial gain to cover medical expenses for their sick and dying mother. So sympathy-wise, I don't think it gets any more sympathetic than that. And now you can make the argument, you know, they're not directly harming anybody. You know what? They're just converting semi-automatic weapons to automatic weapons. And, you know, that's true. They're not directly harming anybody, but they're supplying people who are going to hurt people with those weapons. So, you know, obviously there is a crime being committed. They are enabling people who want to do harm to others for purely financial gain. So yeah, that's the Tran brothers. Lore-wise, it's a sad mission, for sure. Probably one of the saddest in the game. But if you examining them from the lens of aesthetics, they're just dressed in plain clothes. There's nothing too special about them, like that. Atmosphere wise, like I said, it's sad. Like, you really do feel sympathetic for them. So I think their story is just so well written, and they do that in such a good way that they're gonna go up in S as well. Now, impact to the overall lore, like, their story's good, but it just doesn't end, like, it doesn't expand from there. There's not much room for, like, speculation and whatnot. So I don't think they're quite as interesting as Carries the Vine and Gerard Scott, but they are certainly interesting. So that's them. Moving on, we have the shooters from the map The Elephant, which is the community college. And so this is one of those missions that is kind of like the one-off faction type of thing, where it's like they're here as of right now. They're here, and this is the only time that they take place. It is from what I have read, sounds like it's a mental health issue. There's no real motive other than just causing harm to others because they're not feeling good. Like, something's gone wrong mentally, not all there. And so they decide to go through with their plan at that community college. And so, lore-wise, that's pretty much it. Like, that, from what I've read from the wiki, there's not too much in depth there. And as a result, like, we're not working much lore-wise. Aesthetically-wise, not very, similar to Tran Brothers, nothing special attire-wise. Atmosphere-wise, these are one of those factions where it's, it's pretty easy to dislike them. And, like, obviously, people that commit heinous crimes like this for no real motive or anything, not that any motive would excuse this, but it's just not, it doesn't do much. So these guys are getting thrown in D. Honestly, even worse than the delinquents. Like, now I'm not punishing people just because I don't agree with what they're doing. I'll make that right. So, like, if a faction does a really good job at not making you like them, they do a good job at that. Obviously, it's just not that complex here. So, and like I said, atmosphere-wise, aesthetically-wise, they're not doing too much. So, that's going to lead us next to the Greenside homeless. And this is kind of similar to the delinquents, where, these people are homeless. And so, lore-wise, for the mission that they're involved with, which is dorms, essentially, the hurricane blows through Los Sueños. A lot of places aren't safe, and one of these places is the dorms, where there's a lot of homeless activity. So the police go and try to move the homeless into these safe shelters so that they can be, safe and whatnot. And the homeless don't want to leave. This is where they stay, this is what they know, that they want to stay there, they don't want to lose their things, whatever. And so, in the midst of the police trying to get them out, one of the police officers gets shot, and that's when D Platoon goes in to basically arrest the person who shot the police officer and get the rest of the homeless out of there. And so the homeless here are, like I said, slightly sympathetic because obviously, you don't want them, like, they don't want to leave because they don't want to lose their stuff and whatnot. And this is what they know, this is their home. As much as it might not seem like a home to us, it's their home. Whatever. So, they often, I think this is one of the maps where they'll actually, like, try to really not give up because they don't, A, they don't want to leave, and B, it seems like they'd almost rather be taken out by the police before leaving. So, like I said, kind of like, this video is going to be depressing, jeez. It makes you feel bad, and you do your best to sympathize with it, but still get the job done, kind of thing. So, that's them basically lore-wise. Aesthetically, I think homeless, it's just nothing crazy outfit-wise, swearing whatever they can, so nothing too crazy there. And then atmosphere, like I said, it makes you feel a little bit bad, but, there's nothing too special overall about them. It's part of, just that mild sympathetic feeling. they don't invoke anything too special. Like, the Tran brothers do an exceptional job, so to carry is the vine. And they don't really have too deep of lore like Gerard Butler, so... Or not Butler. Gerard Butler is the actor. That's who I keep thinking of when I say Gerard. I think he's the guy that plays... who's the guy from The Boys? Butcher, I think. I could totally have that wrong. I'm not even gonna check. But... I'm gonna check. Hold on. Taking a break to check this. He's in How to Train Your Dragon. I don't know that. Oh yeah, he's Butcher. Billy Butcher. Okay. Nice. Yeah, Gerard Scott is who I'm thinking of. Okay. Thank you for taking that little tangent with me. Okay. So, yeah, because of that, you know, they're sympathetic, but kind of sympathetic in the same way that you don't like the people from Elephant. You don't like the shooters because they're just naturally disdainful, naturally sort of sympathetic. Versus these people, you know, you have to dig deeper to understand why. So that's why I'm going to put them in C. Like, you know, you feel bad, you have to do a little bit of digging. And because of the way they act in the mission is why they're in C and not D. Like, it's deeper than just like, oh, I'm resisting because I don't want to go to jail or whatnot. So, yeah, so that leaves us to the Crescent Shadow security. So this is from the mission on the yacht that I'm blanking on. Leviathan is it's Mirage at Sea. So Mirage at Sea is basically, there's this guy who's very scummy, and he's from Qatar, right? Yeah, I think so. So I think I might have that wrong, but Qatari. So the Crescent Shadow security is a Qatari private security, and they're very well paid by this guy. They're very loyal to him, and they actively help cover up his crimes. So basically, he's wanted for some predatory behavior, and so he flees Qatar, and then he has his yacht, and he invites these 3 people from Los Sueños and the surrounding area to come onto his yacht to basically be a predator, right? So the LSPD gets kind of tipped off to this, and then they deploy D Platoon to go intercept the yacht. And upon D Platoon's arrival, the main guy that you're sent there to arrest, whose name is, once again, I apologize, I'm assuming this might be Arabic. I don't speak Arabic, but Sahid bin Khalid, I believe is his name. Basically, he can actually order the Crescent Shadow security to take out the civilians on the boat that are there. And so obviously if a civilian dies, you know, you lose your S rank, which sucks. And your chance at an A probably too. So, but besides that, you know, they are one of those factions where, like, they're, whether it's financial gain or they have some kind of cult-like affinity for this guy, they are very loyal to him, and they actively go to cover up his crimes. Whether, like I said, it's for financial gain or it's for some pure loyalty thing, I don't know. But either way, you know, they do a good job of making you not like them, and, you know, requires a little bit of digging. So it's a bit better than the Elephant, and it's a bit better, or sorry, the shooters from the Elephant, and it's a bit better from the Greenside homeless from dorms. Lore-wise, you know, it's a little interesting. It's nothing crazy. Atmosphere-wise, you know, like, scummy people makes you not like them. And then aesthetically, you know, nothing too crazy. It's your security. I find them a little less aesthetically pleasing than Mindjot, but because of the lore from them and because of the way that they make you feel, I'm gonna put them like very bottom B, just above C, just like marginally above Mindjot. But yeah. Okay. So moving on to, oh, okay. So once again, I never took Spanish, so I apologize in advance, but La Familia Cardinus? Yes, so basically this is a Mexican cartel, small time, not like the Los Locos del Pacificos. They are involved on that free expansion map Hunger Strike at the restaurant. So basically they're a Mexican cartel, and they are trying to have a deal with the Los Locos del Pacificos, and it goes horribly wrong, and they have a shootout in the parking lot of their restaurant. And from there, D Platoon gets deployed. And that is essentially the lore of the faction. You know, they are spread across Mexico and the United States and Los Sueños, so they have some involvement there, but besides this map, I don't believe we see them anywhere else. And then aesthetically, similar to other gang members, nothing too exciting. They're not decked out in body armor and other cool things, so nothing too crazy. And then atmosphere-wise, not really the most exciting either, so I think this is the first list that we're actually going to have quite a few in the D tier. So, yeah, okay. Alright, moving on to the 213 Hillside Rollers. So this is a basically low-level street gang who's trying to have their come up. And they are doing that by trying to sell weapons to the Los Locos del Pacificos, that main faction that we've talked about basically this whole video and the last video. So essentially, a police officer goes missing at these in the area on a foot pursuit. And after a while, D Platoon's sent in to go look for him, and that's where they come into contact with the 213 Hillside Rollers. So this is on the mission Stolen Valor, and basically it's another street gang, and their main thing is like selling cannabis, and they're forcing some of the tenants in their building to basically work for them in a way. So, kind of scum of the earth people, similar to a lot of people on this list. So similar, it's a faction that you don't like. And in addition to that, it's another gang faction, so like aesthetically they're not the most cool. I mean, I think they're a little better than the Mexican cartel we just spoke of, like aesthetically wise, and atmosphere wise, whereas the other one is purely financial gain, related to drugs. These guys are drugs as well, but they also do other things that are even more like gross. So, like, you like them a lot less atmosphere wise. There's more disdain for them. So I think they're low C compared to other factions that are similar, like gang affiliated factions. Like the Los Locos del Pacificos, they're a little bit better because of just how lore wise they're involved with everything, and you get such a better picture of it because we've been able to examine this from the minor faction perspective now, versus we didn't have too much of that in the last video because we only focused on the major factions. But that's going to lead us to the last one, which are the Rioters, which are basically part of the new Boiling Point DLC, mostly in mostly in All Gods Burn, and sometimes in A New America. So the Rioters, lore-wise, are essentially, once these 2028 riots descend on to the city of Los Sueños, they're involved in basically like looting the bank and causing chaos at the Capitol building, and basically they're used as a distraction by that main faction, the Black Sentinel. And when you're going through those maps, you're dealing with the Rioters, and then boom, you're dealing with the Black Sentinels, and you get stepped up a notch of like, oh, okay, I'm dealing with something completely different. So the Rioters themselves are not too much of a threat. They give up relatively easily, especially when, you hit them with some non-lethals and whatnot. Maybe a flashbang, a little 9-banger action. So nothing too crazy to take them out. Lore-wise, it's interesting how they're used as a pawn by the Black Sentinel, and then by extension the Mariposa Lily organization. So it's pretty cool in that regard. But besides that, it's kind of short-lived. They are a pawn, after all. Aesthetically, they look like riders. They got their shiesties, the ski masks, whatever you want to say. But, they're riders. I don't know. Like, similar to like the delinquents and whatnot, it's not anything too exciting aesthetically. Like, you know, they're not decked out in double body armor, like looking cool like Gerard Scott. Didn't say Beltway this time, almost did. But yeah, and then, you know, it's similar, like atmosphere wise, they don't create, like, there's no sympathy, you know, it's like, it's purely taking advantage of a chaotic situation to try and gain financially. So once again, like, I think lore wise, because they are like a pawn by the Black Sentinel and the Mariposa Lily organization, it makes them a little bit cooler than these guys, and that's why they're not in D. So that's why they're gonna end up in C. But in total, that's gonna be our, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13 minor factions, almost a major. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that, you know, you learned something. And then if there's anything you disagree with or anything I got wrong, because believe me, it's possible, comment down in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.